Hello listeners, this is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation and last and final chapter to Prodigal. This will be chapter 15 entitled, What You Deserve. He found it after returning home from arresting Inko Midoriya. I wanted to kill her, Naomasa admitted as they neared Shota's home away from UA. Shota scowled. I would not have stopped you. She won't get out, Eraser. From what you learned from Mizu and what she openly admitted to us today, she'll be away for a long time. He could still see her face, bewildered that someone would care so much about her troubled son. He admitted that was partly society's fault. The prejudices and bitterness toward quirkless people had shaped her own view of Izuku to the point where he was nothing more than the nuisance that everyone from his childhood labeled him as. However, much like Bakugo, she was responsible for her own damn actions. There were consequences for the treatment that Izuku had experienced, and Inko was just the first in a long line to suffer Aizawa's wrath. She deserves to rot in hell. Yeah, well, someone we both love would probably say that it's not about what she deserves. Shota huffed. He was excited you stopped by. Naomasa grinned. It was very Izuku-like. I was glad I could make it. I hate seeing him hurt, but he smiles like none of it matters, like he's on cloud 9. The pro nodded. He has always been good at finding the light, and if he can't find it, he'll make it. He's blinding. Perhaps it was meant to sound annoyed, but the detective saw right through his friend's facade. He did not comment on it. Instead, as he turned the corner down Aizawa Street, he muttered quite cheerfully, So, I hear that Nezu's been demoted. Shota could not contain his malicious grin as he glanced toward the detective. Indeed. We've been able to put together a substantial case against him. Unfortunately, he has enough sway left to remain at UA, just not as principal. Who's taking the job? Naomasa raised a brow. The underground hero shook his head. No. I'm not leaving my class in someone else's hands. Not me. Namuri, maybe. She's more than qualified. More importantly, she's kind. Mike wants to as well, so it might be a joint leadership. We'll see what happens. Not really my priority right now. His companion hummed, nodding. And All Might? Just the mention of the scumbag's name was enough to get Shota's gut churning. He is no longer a teacher. That is a disappointingly small punishment. Izuku spoke for him. Naomasa's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles turning white. Did he? Shota frowned. From his fucking hospital bed. He was quite adamant. He understands that some form of retribution is required, but unfortunately he also made some logical points in the bastard's defense. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. The kid doesn't realize how much he's been wronged. I get that his past influences his perception of reality, but sometimes I wish he would just scream at people, attack them. God knows he's earned it. Mirio? They pulled up beside Shota's home. Mary waved at him from her reading perch in the breakfast nook window. Besides being shunned, nothing. Shota growled, remembering all the horribly accepting gazes that appeared in his kid's eyes. Legally, we're empty-handed with those two. Nezu's different. Technically, he coerced Izuku into dropping. Izuku gave Mirio the quirk. I know he was influenced by All Might. I get that. But on paper, that doesn't hold up. Mirio thought what he was doing would save lives. Same with Yagi. He took a deep breath, forcing his rampaging heart to slow. Anger helped no one now. That's what I teach my students to do. It's what heroes are supposed to do. They make tough decisions to save lives. Yagi truly believed he was keeping Izuku safe. Don't tell me you're forgiving him. Shota's lip curled. You won't even be able to pry forgiveness from my cold, dead hands. Naomasa nodded. It was as good as they were getting. Tell him I said hi. Katsuki too. He agreed, holding out a hand. Thanks, Masa. The detective lit up at the endearing nickname and clasped his fingers. Any time, Sho. The other man rolled his eyes, but allowed it. He exited the car. Sho! Eri cried as she pulled the door open. Immediately she latched onto his legs. He smiled softly and ran his fingers through her hair. You're home! Momo stuck her head around the corner. Sensei. We're outside of school, Momo, he replied to the babysitter. You can call me Aizawa. Sorry, Sensei. She blushed. No need. Thank you for watching Eri while I dealt with official business. She's delightful. the girl answered with a soft smile. Shota was inclined to agree. He paid her, and she hugged Eri before going on her way back to the dorms. "Let me grab a few things, and then we'll head over to the hospital," he explained gently, kissing his daughter's forehead. "You can visit Mirio." "Yay!" She clapped her hands and nuzzled into her dad's embrace. "Can I see Deku?" "If he's up for a visit," Shota hummed. "The new treatment makes him really tired, Eri." "Okay." The white-haired girl nodded in understanding, even as she frowned. Man, he lucked out, didn't he? "Get your bag together. I'll be back in a few minutes." Shota left her to collect her things as he retrieved some papers from his office. He had not been in here since before the battle, and it showed. Everything was still in disarray, from his sleepless nights waiting for his problem child to return from his nocturnal adventuring. Had it really only been 2 weeks since that fateful Wednesday? It felt like decades. Shota ran a weary hand over his face and sighed. Seeing all of his Hell class in the hospital for any amount of time frayed his nerves. Half of them stayed for at least a week due to serious injury. Many of the pros involved in the battle were there as well. Villains who had been detained were treated and then sent to jail. It was odd how jovial the specific wing of the hospital had become in their stay. Most of his class was out by now, however. They would need physical therapy for a while, especially Jiro and Ida, but they would be all right. They would be amazing. Izuku was the only one left who was still confined to his bed. After receiving one frolic and charging it to 100%, he had been left spent. Shota had yet to gain a full night's sleep with the loud blare of him flatlining going off in his mind, and yet he would survive. Izuku was good at that. Shota smiled fondly and turned back to the task at hand. When his file remained elusive, he ventured to his bedroom. Perhaps he left it. There was an envelope on his dresser. The handwriting on the back alone almost made him cry. He gently pried the letter open. "Sensei, should you be reading this, I can only assume the worst has happened, and I'm sorry." Shota really wanted to shake the kid until he understood that everything was not his fault. He wished he could make Izuku understand just how wonderful he was, how adored, how his mother, how All Might, how all those idiots from his childhood were so mistaken. He wished he could make him see how many people loved him. Izuku had left another letter. Shota could bet money that it was another goodbye. "I wanted to write something in case I never got the courage to say things to you. I promise this won't be as long as my last letter, assuming you read that one too. I promise I'll hold nothing against you if you didn't. My handwriting can be hard to decipher." Aizawa scoffed wetly, as if the letters on the page weren't perfect, as if Izuku did not have a different writing style for his notebooks and his sweet notes, as if the words on the paper were more befitting of ancient poetry than a farewell. "It has been a long time since I have truly wanted to live, but you helped me find that desire again, and for that I can never be thankful enough. That's why I'm hoping you never read this. I want to survive this, Sensei. I want to come home with you. I want to be a hero. More than that, though, I think I want to be a kid. I never really got to be one after I was diagnosed as quirkless. I'd forgotten what ice cream tasted like until I moved into the dorms. I had no idea how to play things like dodgeball and video games. I did not get to play catch with my dad. I want those things now, Sensei. I want them with you. Call me selfish, that's okay. Maybe I am. Perhaps it is selfish to crave a happily ever after, but I guess I'll make that sacrifice. I want to be happy. I haven't wanted that in a long time. And that, in part, is thanks to you. You took me in and cared about me despite my shortcomings and failures. You believed me when few else did. Believed in me. It means more than you'll ever know." Shota wanted to gasp out that Izuku owed him nothing, that it was the least he could do. He wanted to tell him how much he deserved a good life, a family, friends who celebrated birthdays with him and hugged him with everything they had. He deserved that and so much more. "Thank you for everything, for letting me feel happy for a little while. I hope you were happy too. I think your happiness is one of the things I've wanted more than anything else in my entire life. Take care of Katsuki for me. He's going to be an amazing hero. I never had a dad, really, but I think you're going to be a great one. I love you, Dad. Sensei." Shota swallowed. A tear dropped right under the D of the honored title. He slipped the letter back into its envelope and left it on the dresser. Eri called his name from downstairs, and he shook himself out of his stupor. Right. Papers. Hospitals were the worst. Shota's experience in the horrible buildings of pain and death were less than favorable. However, this visit was less depressing because he already knew the outcome of each person in one of the wretched beds. The heroes won. Sho? He glanced down at the little girl whose hand was intertwined with his. Yes, Eri. She hummed thoughtfully, skipping in step beside him. Where are we going? The pro tiredly rubbed the back of his neck. We're visiting Todoroki. The half-and-half boy was one of her favorites among Aizawa's class, as shown by her excited reaction. Eri jumped with joy and began talking animatedly about the one time Shoto had used himself as a stove to cook her bacon. She thought he was very cool. He also let her braid his hair, which earned him large favors. Shota let her talk. The pros that were minimally wounded had returned to hero work, but not without all stopping by to pay respects to the warrior children. Izuku had asked for autographs from all of them. The Todoroki's room was on the 3rd floor. Rei, Natsuo, and Fuyumi had already visited and returned home. From what Tsuyu had told him, the reunion was very emotional. When they reached the door, Shota stopped. He could hear voices on the other side, all three hushed and shattered. I don't deserve it, Toya. I never will. You never have to forgive me, my boy, but I want you to know that I am so sorry. For all of it. For every single thing. Enji Todoroki spoke with the tone of a broken man. Shota knew some of the history of the Todoroki family. From talks with the youngest son to Izuku's letter, he could put the pieces together. The puzzle revealed a shattered family. However, even shattered glass could make beautiful art, and forgiveness filled in the cracks with gold. Dabi, Toya, replied softly, voice trembling. Somebody taught me, it's not about what you deserve, Dad. That phrase seemed to be the winning one of the day. Shota sighed and knocked on the door. He had a sneaking suspicion he knew the person who had taught the kid that lesson. Enji Todoroki was sitting up in the hospital bed, bandages wrapped around his chest. Bionic prosthetics were already in the works to replace the leg he had lost. The scarred side of his face was covered by more gauze, compared to what Shota had first seen. Unconscious and hooked up to more wires than Mike's old computer, he looked fit as a fiddle. Dabi, or Toya, as Aizawa was beginning to call him, was in the chair to his father's right. His hands were wrapped from quirk exhaustion. Shoto leaned against the window of his father's left, looking happy just to bask in the presence of his brother and father. His left arm was in a sling, and his chest was covered in white dressings. A broken lot, the Todorokis, but even shattered bones can find their mending. They would do the same. A racer, Enji and Toya called at the same time that Shoto smiled. Sensei. How is Izuku? The youngest continued. Stir-crazy, the guardian replied honestly. He hasn't been able to leave his bed yet. It's wearing him down, but it's good for him. He needs the rest. We owe him our lives. The patriarch did not smile, but his eyes did. I've been wanting to visit him, but... He's had plenty of company, Shota assured. He led Eri over to the trio. The little girl looked at them quietly, smiling sweetly when her gaze met Shoto's. She took one look at Toya, and her eyes grew wide. He cracked a side smile. That ugly, huh, kid? She did not reply immediately. Her flat shoes made small pats against the floor as she walked closer to his father's hospital bed. Enji and Shoto watched closely. Her small hands hesitantly reached up to hold his face. Toya flinched. Kid, don't. Why? Her innocence sometimes made Shoto want to cry. Pretty things like you shouldn't touch monsters. Eri shook her head, adorably understanding smile, squishing her cheeks. You're not a monster. You're just a little broken, but don't worry. I can fix it. Shota could not stop the fond expression that overtook his face. His kids really were going to be incredible heroes. Eri placed her small palms against his scarred cheeks. He shuddered and lowered his head into her warm touch, tilting into her hands and focusing half-lidden, cerulean eyes on her crimson ones. Aizawa wondered when the last time was that someone held Toya like he mattered, like he was precious, like he deserved to be saved. Eri's horn glowed. The reformed villain gasped as her quirk activated. Several long seconds passed, and the light died. Toya's scars went with it. Enji burst into tears. Shoto soon followed, grabbing his father's hand. Toya, and fuck, he looked so young like that, leaned deeper into the little girl's hands. Just another child who had been left behind to pick up the shattered pieces of themselves, abandoned to rescue themselves from the demons that threatened to overcome them. His skin, fresh and clear, turned pink under Harry's fingertips. Thank you, he croaked. Thank you. No need, she answered, just as soft. Shota was so damn proud. It's what heroes do. They left the Todorokis in a tangled mess of shaking limbs and wet cheeks. Eri linked her hand back through Shota's and leaned into his side. He forced himself not to cry. Hato met him outside Mirio's door. She and Tamaki were pros in their own right now. They had rarely left their friend's side since he had been admitted to the hospital, but they were always willing to let Eri join them, as they sat with the golden-haired boy. Eri jumped into her arms, just like so many times before, and Shota kissed her forehead before returning to the elevator. He didn't spare Yagi, who had been watching him from inside Mirio's room, even a glance. The elevator was far too slow for his liking, but he reached the 5th floor without trouble. Most of his students had been in these rooms to begin with, but they were vacant now, all save one. He could hear Izuku's laughter from the end of the hall. "Did you see Kiri's face when he talked about Mina kissing him?" "Course I did, nerd. He got as red as his dumb hair." "His hair is not dumb, Kachan." "Yes, it is. Shut up. What would you know about hairstyle, anyway? You look like a piece of broccoli." "You look like you stuck your finger in an open socket as a child, Kachan. Don't start with me." Shota grinned. The pair had been inseparable. Katsuki had been released fairly early after the battle. He did not stray far. He had asked for a cot to sleep in beside Izuku's bed until he woke up, and even then he did not leave unless it was to see the rest of their class or his parents. Mitsuki and Masaru, Bakugo, had been very present in Izuku's recovery as well. Shota was pleased to learn they loved Izuku as much as he did. Problem Child was adored by so many. He had no idea how many people would risk their lives for him without a second thought. He had done the same for them on the battlefield. Izuku had enough injuries to kill a regular person twice over, but one for all did not let his bearer succumb to his wounds. Even though he had flatlined twice, he had pulled through. With the help of many medical professionals, including Recovery Girl, he healed quickly. However, One for All had taken more from him than ever before. By all accounts, he should have been able to return to the dorm several days ago, but his power was still draining him after being used at such a high percentage without any airy-shaped assistance. He opened the door right as Katsuki continued, scowl on his face. "But it was nothing next to how red Dunceface got when earphones held his hand. God, I wish you could have seen it." Izuku smiled softly from his bed, head tilted toward his friend, who was seated in the bed with him. Their shadows were intertwined on the opposite wall, golden light mixing to make their eyes sparkle. "Me too." Neither boy noticed him enter, too absorbed with the other. Bakugo heard the solemn tone in his friend's voice and turned back to him. "Hey, Deku, stop that. You'll be out of here soon enough, don't worry. Sensei isn't going to let you wallow for much longer." "No, I am not," Shota agreed loudly, making both boys jump. He would berate them for their lack of awareness, but he supposed he could excuse it. Hospitals were not meant for fear, or suspicion. They were meant for healing. Izuku needed to do a lot of healing. "Hey, Dad," Izuku hummed tenderly as Shota rubbed his knuckles across those many freckles. Shota would not cry. He would not cry. He would not cry like a wailing baby at the title that this beautiful kid had graciously bestowed on him. "Hey, Green Bean. Feel better?" He shrugged, not moving the hand that was intertwined with Bakugo's. "Tired." "I'm shocked," the pro drawled, pulling up a chair and seating himself. "Your mom was arrested this afternoon." Both boys stiffened, and the vigilante's head dropped. He stared at his lap. Did she struggle?" "Yes," Shota answered honestly. "But not in the beginning. Only once we told her how long she'd get." Izuku licked his lips. "And how long is that?" "If I get my way the rest of her life." Aizawa fought to keep the snarl out of his voice, but failed. His hand fisted where it lay on the kid's blanket. "But that doesn't matter. If she gets out, you'll be long gone. She won't even recognize you." Izuku's expression betrayed his thoughts. He did not know whether or not that was a good thing. "I'll kill her if she ever comes near you again," Katsuki offered. "If that helps." The other teenager did not seem to appreciate the attempt at levity, but Shota did not expect him to be happy about the news concerning his mother. Izuku felt deeply, perhaps deeper than anyone else Shota had ever met. Even though his mother had mistreated him, practically abandoned him, and disowned him, he still loved her. He still had sweet memories of playing with her, of dancing in their living room, holding her hand in the grocery store aisles. He remembered Inko when she was still good. And perhaps there was a redemption she could try for. Secretly, horribly, Shota wished she'd never gained it. "Uraraka?" Izuku's small voice surfaced. Shota winced. Just another betrayal in his long, long lineup, it seemed. He will admit that the revelation of his sweet student's treachery garnered several tears. He had cried for the loss of her innocence, the loss of her future filled with light and goodness and triumph. She was only 16, too young to know so much evil, too young to crave it. She is being sent to a juvenile prison for now. The two students nodded, taking the information as well as could be expected. Neither was happy about it, but they understood. Was it? The unspoken question twisted Shota's heart. No, problem child. It had nothing to do with you. I believe that Uraraka was lost long before we reached her. Izuku nodded sorrowfully. He took a deep breath and wiped his damp eyes. Did the doctors tell you when I can get out of here? Shota did not acknowledge the extreme change in conversation. The kid had earned the right to avoid certain topics like the plague. If everything checks out, this weekend. Both boys brightened like shooting stars. Yes! Bakugo cried, thrusting a fist into the air. Izuku preened, practically vibrating with excitement. The dorms? The pro nodded. You'll be re-enrolled in 2 weeks. We're giving you all a break from academics for a little while. We need time to rebuild the campus, and your teachers need to deal with the paperwork and the press. He did not mention that it was really because the kids deserved a break, all of them. He did not tell them that he had ordered the recess after seeing Kaminari shaking hands try and finish math homework due Monday. After watching Koda try to finish a hero ethics essay with a broken arm. His hell class had seen hell, and they deserved a few quiet days. He could not give them heaven, but he would try. Hear that, Kachan? I'm about to kick your ass again, and it'll be on record. Best of luck, shitty nerd, his best friend replied with ease, leaning back into the bed again, hands still tightly in Izuku's. You'll have to train pretty hard to surpass me. One more thing, problem child. Izuku hummed, leaning into Katsuki's side. His eyelids fluttered. Shota forced his expression to remain neutral. God, his son was adorable. Sign this. The green-haired boy nudged his friend, who replied in kind, and sat up a little straighter to take his teacher's pen. Katz, do you think you could get Kami to bring a Switch when he visits next time? I want to play Breath of the Wild. I'll buy you one. Shota interrupted before Bakugo could reply. The blonde glanced down at the papers and smirked. His best friend did not seem to have the same realization. Izuku tilted his head in surprise, cheeks darkening. What? Why would you buy me a Nintendo Switch? Shota could not keep the fond smile off his lips, exasperated though it was. Problem child could be so unaware. Call it a present for all the birthdays I wasn't around for. The poor boy seemed to only grow more confused. Not once had he looked down at the papers he had just signed. The complete trust that this kid had in his teacher was frightening. Shota would have called him out on it if he had not been so focused on keeping his tears in his throat. Sensei, you don't buy birthday presents for your students, and why would you need to make up for my birthdays? Bakugo lifted a fist to his mouth to stifle a snort. Shota leaned forward, ebony eyes meeting gray and green. You're right, problem child. I don't buy presents for my students. However, I do buy presents for my son. And finally, Izuku's gaze dropped to the small stack in his lap. These are adoption papers. Very observant, Shota agreed, but it was far softer and gentler than he had intended. God, what were these kids doing to him? Izuku. The kid read out his name slowly, trying it out on his tongue. Izuku Aizawa. If you want, his guardian stuttered. Izuku looked up at him, and Shota felt that he could have put the stars in the sky to deserve such an expression. You want to adopt me? I feel like it has been mentioned before, problem child. Aizawa chuckled. But yes. More than anything in the entire world. You're going to be my dad? As if Shota could want anything more. If you'll have me. Of course I want you, he gasped, eyes misting. It's all... I don't... Take a breath, Izu. Bakugo huffed affectionately. Izuku scoffed in disbelief, tears falling down his cheeks like glistening clockwork. I don't deserve this. It's not about what you deserve, idiot. Katsuki leaned over and knocked the green-haired boy's forehead with his own. And if it was, this is nothing compared to all you've earned. So shut up and let us take care of you. It's a bothersome job, Izuku whispered, but he curled into the embrace, the touch, the love. Shota lifted a hand to place against his son's cheek. Not to us. Katsuki buried his nose in Izuku's curls. Not if it's you. Izuku, who had been abused his entire life, who had been left behind and forgotten, betrayed and abandoned. Izuku, who had been told by everyone, including his idol, that he did not have what it took to be a hero. Izuku who fought tooth and nail, bloody lips and broken bones. Izuku whose smile put the sunshine to shame and whose freckles dotted his cheeks like the twinkles of starlight. Izuku finally fell into the waiting arms of those who loved him, and there he would stay. The prodigal son returned, safe and sound. All right, listeners, this concludes the fic entitled Prodigal. I hope you all have enjoyed it. This is a very angsty fic, but it's one that I go back to a lot and reread. Let me know your general overall thoughts and reactions to the entirety of this fic. And as always, thank you so much for listening.